Hi, Jack. Come on in.
The Overlook Hotel is an iconic milestone in the horror genre, even if you've never read the Stephen King novel or watched the movie. The description of its hallways, the bloody elevator, everything about the Overlook Hotel is just so iconic and memorable. While there's no doubt about the malevolent nature, you have to start wondering at one point, why was the Overlook Hotel evil? Well, that's what we're going to find out in this video, so get your coziest blanket and join us on this horrifying deep dive. Before we get too far ahead of ourselves though, we have a very small request. If you like our content, please support us by subscribing to the channel. This is a small click for you, but for us, it means a lot. Thank you. Let's begin. The Cursed Foundation. Origins of the Overlook Hotel. Before we get into the origins of the hotel in the movie or the book, we should look into what led Stephen King to come up with the concept of the hotel in the first place, right? Well, as it turns out, Stephen King actually drew inspiration from a very real-life experience. So back in the day, in 1974, Stephen King and his wife were having a short stay in Boulder, Colorado. During this stay, they checked into the Stanley Hotel near Estes Park. Now, this resort hotel is usually very hustling and bustling in the summer, but during the winter season, it had an eerie atmosphere that, in turn, profoundly impacted the writer. In The Stephen King Companion, written by George Beam, it turns out that King had explored the hallways in the hotel during his stay. He eventually encountered a bartender who was named, you guessed it, Grady. Then, when he returned to his room, 217, King wondered if someone had died in the hotel. I mean, given the location of the hotel, the unsettling isolation, and the grand size of it, altogether, it made quite the place to die, right? Now, sure, the Stanley Hotel clearly plays a huge role in the inspiration behind the Overlook Hotel, but don't think that Stephen King based the hauntings of the Overlook Hotel on what he may or may not have experienced in the Stanley Hotel. Instead, he said that the hotel merely gave him an idea of a beautiful resort in Colorado being this malevolent entity. I mean, it tracks. If you take a look at King's stories, in most cases, he takes something that is completely innocent at first glance, a daily appliance or a day-to-day car, and then turns it demonic, creating a deep sense of unease. Stephen King noted that some of the most beautiful resort hotels in the country are actually in Colorado. I guess in his writer's mind, he just wanted to take this beautiful place that's supposed to bring people serenity, peace, and an escape from their daily lives, and twist it into something that was dark and gritty, breeding a deep sense of unease. Whether you like it or not, you got to admit it actually made quite the impact on readers over the years. From his short stay in Boulder, Colorado, Stephen King managed to give us a haunted house that we were never able to forget over the years, and out of all the spirits and hauntings we see detailed in his novel, the hotel takes the cake when it comes to horror. It might not seem like it at first glance, but the Overlook Hotel has a rich history. The very building was cursed because it was built on cursed ground that should have never been used for construction. So, according to the story, back in 1907, Robert Townley Watson decided to start the construction of the Overlook Hotel at an incredibly serene spot. However, the ground that they were building on was sacred to the Native Americans. The Native Americans actually attacked the construction workers several times during the building process, which led to the construction taking 2 years to finish. The ground Watson chose to build the hotel on was later found to be an indigenous burial ground. As you can guess, that wasn't really the best choice they could have made. Eventually, after the construction was done, Watson decided to name the hotel Overlook. Perhaps he chose the name Overlook because the residents would be overlooking this beautiful view in front of them, but once you know all of the context behind the ground that the hotel is built on, the name quickly takes an ironic yet sinister turn, doesn't it? The bloody history of the Overlook Hotel. When you take a look at the Overlook Hotel, you can see that it's a highly luxurious, extravagant place. However, there's something extremely dark and twisted hiding underneath the bright facade that we see on the surface. In 1977, Jack ended up coming across a bunch of old desk registers. From those desk registers, we got a very nice idea of just how popular and well-loved the Overlook Hotel was back in the day. 50 years ago, back in the 1920s, Henry Ford and his family came over and stayed at the Colorado resort. They had an enjoyable time at the hotel, which helped the hotel gain quite a bit of publicity, because, as you can see from the logs, soon after Henry Ford, all the stars started following in his footsteps and visiting the Overlook Hotel. Jean Harlow, Clark Gable, Carol Lombard, and many more famous people stayed at the Overlook Hotel in the 1930s, so with that kind of money flowing in, you have to wonder exactly where things went wrong that the Overlook Hotel ended up getting so poor when Jack started working as the caretaker. Well, as it turns out, things started going wrong pretty much right from the 1940s. If you've seen the Stanley Kubrick film, we're sure that none of you were able to forget the iconic man in the dog mask that Wendy saw running in the upstairs hallway. Now, in the movie, it seemed like this man was just a fleeting haunting, and sure, that definitely made him highly memorable. However, if you've read the actual novel, you would know that there was actually a lot more to this dog mask man than on the surface. So this man in the dog mask was Roger. He had a fling with another man known as Horace Derwent in Cuba. Roger became incredibly infatuated with Derwent and was ready to follow him wherever he went, and eventually he showed up in Colorado at the Overlook Hotel. Now, Derwent was a bisexual man by nature, but he refused to maintain any relationship with a man. Whether it was because of societal pressure or because he simply didn't wish to be with a man in a romantic way wasn't confirmed. As you can imagine, Roger couldn't get close to Derwent. Unless, of course, Roger acted like a dog. That's right, folks. Roger had to put on a full dog costume, do tricks for Derwent, and howl along with the band as long as it meant he could remain close to Derwent. While King doesn't give us a detailed explanation of how Roger ended up dying, we wouldn't be surprised if his soul is trapped in this mortal plane, specifically within the hotel, because of the foul treatment he received from Derwent. With that kind of messed up behavior, it's perfectly understandable if you guys wanted to hate on Derwent. I do too. But the thing is, Horace Derwent ended up saving the Overlook Hotel in a way. From 1929 to 1936, the Overlook Hotel was sold several times. Right after World War II, Derwent became the owner. Derwent was this inventor, entrepreneur, pilot, and film producer. Despite having these many qualities, when it came to the Overlook Hotel, Horace's ability to earn money from practically anything that he touched just simply didn't work. He used around $3 million to renovate the Overlook, but despite the new decor and renovations, the Overlook Hotel did not show any signs of gaining traction anytime soon, and that led to Derwent eventually selling the hotel to the investors from California. So, while Derwent did not get to earn a lot of money from the Overlook Hotel, the lavish interior that we are seeing right now is because of him. After buying the hotel from Horace Derwent, no one knew what the investors from California wanted to do. But from the register, it was very evident that the hotel was popular between the years 1952 and 63. Then, in 1963, the hotel was sold to High Country Investments. Robert T. Leffing, the spokesperson for High Country Investments, was the owner of the hotel. But then, after a few years, Derwent went back to the hotel and bought the hotel back. Jack Torrance found a copy of the paper that stated Derwent had connections in Las Vegas. The paper doesn't explain that the connections Derwent had were actually with the mob, but it stated that in 1963, a group of investors bought the hotel from High Country Investments and turned Overlook Hotel into a key club. All the memberships of the key club went to the foreign and American companies. In the article we see in King's book, it was stated that Derwent actually had a huge role in controlling the High Country Investments. So he bought the hotel for himself and then sold it to the shady people with very obvious connections with the gambling world. Seeing this, Jack actually contacted his boss, Ullman, to squeeze out whatever information he could, specifically about the hotel at the time. And during that call and the investigation that he conducted, it was confirmed that Derwent and the mob were very much tied in together. They were using the Overlook Hotel as a cover to conduct their illegal businesses privately. Derwent's work during that time actually tallies up really well with the mob activities that were recorded at the time. Sure, the Overlook Hotel was a nice and beautiful place, but there's no denying that its secluded location made it the perfect place for mob members to bring whoever they wanted to take care of there while keeping stuff off the books. This intrigued Jack, and as he delved deeper into the hotel's ownership lore, he found out that it was practically impossible to figure out who actually owned the hotel at a given point in time because of how it had been tied up with so many different holdings. This, of course, helped Derwent and the mob to conduct their business. If any heat came their way, the government would never actually be able to tie them to the Overlook Hotel because they weren't openly the owner of the hotel. It's kind of a genius plan. While Ullman may not have been telling Jack the actual history of the Overlook Hotel in detail, the implications are actually very clear from King's original text. We see Jack read a bunch of newspaper clippings, and all of these articles detail Derwent's involvement with the Las Vegas businesses. They also included articles about the gang murders that happened in the Overlook Hotel. In fact, there was another article, which was undated, that described a gangland-style shooting at a Colorado hotel. It detailed the shootout orchestrated by two men who stayed at the presidential suite of the Overlook Hotel. This mafia hit claimed the life of Vittorio Ginelli, the mob boss who was more commonly known as the Chopper, along with two of his subordinates. The underlings, Roger McCasey and Victor T. Boorman, were found sprawled right outside the suite, while Ginelli was found inside the room. He was eviscerated with close-range blasts from a double-barreled shotgun. While the article was undated, we can kind of guess that this hit probably took place around 1966, because in 1967, the hotel was sold again. The article in Jack's hand does not disclose who actually bought the hotel this time around. However, it is implied that the mafia hits were getting more and more brutal, which led to this business decision. The film and the novel have their differences. However, the one thing they both showed was the Grady murders. As Ullman put it, Delbert Grady, the last caretaker of the Overlook Hotel, got extremely drunk and went completely insane from cabin fever while taking care of the hotel in the off-season. He then used an axe to violently chop up his 2 daughters, and then, using a double-barreled shotgun, he shot both his wife and himself. The deaths are gruesome already, but the novel adds a bit more detail about the murders. We learn that the bodies were actually found by the National Park Ranger after he stopped by the hotel to check in on the caretaker and his family after he noticed that the Overlook's phone lines were down. He found the entire family in the west wing of the 3rd floor. They were completely frozen solid from the cold, which is simply spine-chilling. No pun intended. Luckily, Ullman managed to keep everything pretty hush-hush. In the novel, we learn from Bill Watson that the Grady family murders showed up in the papers, but their story was soon forgotten by the world. Then, of course, we come to the woman in room 217, or 237 according to the film. We don't get to know a lot about her in the movie, but things are a little different in the novel. We find out that Lorraine Massey was a woman married to a very well-known lawyer. However, she was a little promiscuous and often stayed in the Overlook Hotel with men who were far younger than her. In the 1975 season, Lorraine killed herself in room 217 after her lover left without a word. To avoid the insidious scandal, her body was moved out of the tub as secretively as possible. However, surprisingly enough, a day later, Dolores Vickery, a hotel maid, found Massey's bloated body in her resting place, that is, the tub. Vickery told Ullman about what happened, and Ullman responded to the horror story by firing Vickery. Luckily, she managed to tell Halloran about what she saw in room 217, and Halloran saw the ghost too. Then, in 1977, we've got Jack Torrance showing up at the Overlook Hotel with his wife and kid. He showed up here as the winter caretaker for the hotel. He wanted to research and write about his play, but in the end, he ended up falling victim to the spirits that haunted the place. Torrance's descent into madness is genuinely a fascinating topic, and we'll certainly look into it in a bit here, but for now, the mentionable points are that, well, in the film, Jack killed off Halloran. In the book, Halloran managed to survive Jack's attacks and save Danny and Wendy. In the film, we see Jack Torrance die in the hedge maze while following his son. In the book, however, Jack brings an end to him and the hotel in one go. He forgot to dump the boiler intentionally, and this led to the hotel's destruction. Now, let's fast forward to 2013. In 2013, we get the novel Dr. Sleep, where Stephen King introduces us to a group of psychic vampires who feast on the shine, or steam as they call it. This is the True Knot. They live in RVs and travel from one place to another. Now, at one point, they end up stopping at the Overlook Hotel. The ghosts of the Overlook Hotel seem to be rather drawn to the campground where the True Knot set up their base. Danny, who is the titular Dr. Sleep in this movie, had dealt with the trauma he faced in the Overlook Hotel by trapping all of the ghosts of the hotel in his mental lockboxes. We see him unleash the ghosts of the Overlook onto the True Knot members to save himself and save the day. Other than that, we also get to see Jack Torrance make a return, this time a lot more sober and in his senses. He helped his adult son push the leader of the True Knot, Rose the Hat, to her end. Now, in Kubrick's The Shining, Jack Torrance didn't burn the Overlook Hotel to the ground. So, in 2019's Dr. Sleep, directed by Mike Flanagan, we see Danny Torrance go back to the hotel again with his protege, Abra. There, they fight against the final boss, Rose the Hat. Danny and Rose go against each other using psychic energy until he manages to unleash all of the ghosts of the hotel on her. Then, before they could feast on Danny, he ran to the boiler room, finishing the hotel once and for all and bringing an end to the horrors of the Overlook Hotel. Overlook Hotel, overlooking horror. We've heard before that Stephen King's universe is all connected, right? You might think that the horrors of the Overlook Hotel are only trapped between The Shining and Dr. Sleep, but the reality is a lot different. It actually shows up in another absolutely spine-chilling story by Stephen King. In Misery, Stephen King's 1987 book, we learn that Andrew Pomeroy was on an assignment to sketch the ruins of the Overlook Hotel. That's when he met Annie Wilkes. Wilkes brought him home and they slept together. However, the truth of Pomeroy's visit soon became rather evident to Annie. Turns out there was no assignment. He was just there in the hopes that he could sell his paintings to anyone who might be interested. Annie didn't find any of his paintings that good, and his lying pissed her off, so she drowned him in her tub, dismembered him, and then dumped his body in the Grider Wildlife Preserve. Later, Andrew's remains were found in the ashes of the Overlook Hotel, but no one knows if Annie was the one who brought the remains there or not. Overlook Hotel, the living entity that wasn't actually alive. First of all, we gotta give it up for Jack Nicholson and Shelley Duvall's acting chops in the 1980 movie. Kubrick definitely manages to bring forward the horrors that Jack Torrance and his family went through at the hands of the Overlook Hotel. However, the most dynamic character of the film, in our opinion, has got to be the hotel itself. Although it might not seem like it, you can see all the sinister nods to its dark mind that is ever present but not quite explained in words. Charles Grady killing his family, the construction of the hotel on the burial ground, and head cook Dick Halloran's warnings about the shine left by past events, all of them are nods to the dark nature of the hotel. But all of them are simply scratching the surface of all this evil and maliciousness that the Overlook Hotel contains deep within its body. Let's start with the architectural design of the hotel, as I believe that's the first thing we see of it. The physical form of the hotel serves as this symbolic manifestation of both psychological and supernatural forces, which would, in turn, explain the way the hotel influenced all the characters, changed their perception and behavior, and eventually led to their descent into madness. The hotel's blueprints transform right in front of our eyes, showing just how dynamic it can be throughout the plot of the movie. By doing so, the hotel in turn blurs the line between reality and the supernatural. The Overlook Hotel has limitations to its physical form. As the storyline moves forward, both the characters and we, the audience, are left completely uncomfortable from the way the film's atmosphere becomes haunting. Right off the bat, everyone can see that there's a huge difference between the hotel's blueprint and the interior configuration. This makes a lot of sense when you consider how many hotels were actually used to give us the Overlook. For the exterior shots that we see in the movie, the Timberline Lodge plays the role of the Overlook. The Timberline Lodge varies quite a bit from the Stanley Hotel, which served as the main inspiration for the Overlook, but the position of the Timberline Lodge on the slopes of Mount Hood in Oregon truly shows off the isolation that Stephen King wanted to convey. However, there is a little issue. The Timberline Lodge doesn't have the vast expanse of space that would be required for the hedge maze. Another thing to note is that there is a considerable difference between the Timberline Lodge's design and the interior design of the Overlook Hotel. This discrepancy also plays a role in the living architecture, as it feels like the hotel we see on the outside is nothing like the one we see once we enter through the gates. When it comes to the interior design of the Overlook Hotel, the Ahwahnee Hotel inspired it quite a bit. The Ahwahnee Hotel is in Yosemite National Park and was designed by the same architect who designed the Timberline Hotel, Gilbert Stanley Underwood. This is why both hotels shared an architectural kinship with the Overlook, and Kubrick was able to use the Ahwahnee Hotel to get ideas about the use of Native American symbols in the background. The majority of the shooting takes place in Elstree Studios in England. The Grand Lounge of the Ahwahnee Hotel inspired the grandeur of the Overlook's interior design, and layout shifted from scene to scene as Kubrick took a lot of liberties. Since all the interior shots were created from scratch in the studios, Kubrick could easily play with the spatial relationships in each of the rooms and create the iconic visual effects, like the blood-gushing elevator, which he wouldn't have been able to use had he used a real-world set. The iconic hedge maze, on the other hand, was actually created from scratch using studio techniques. None of the hotels had any hedge mazes on their properties, Ahwahnee, Timberline, or Stanley. Although later, the Stanley Hotel would add a hedge maze on their property as an homage to the movie. Since the hedge maze in question was created in studio, the iconic overhead shot of characters moving through the labyrinth was created using the painted backdrop and combining that with footage of filming the actors from high-rise buildings. This kind of creative filming technique also played a massive role in the disjointed relationship with reality, giving us a very trippy view of how things are extremely different in the hotel's premises. Every fan has noticed that there are several spatial anomalies and inconsistencies in the hotel, with doors that lead nowhere, vanishing pieces of furniture, and more. One of the executive producers of The Shining, Jan Harlan, mentioned that all of the spatial inconsistencies were actually intentional. They wanted the audience to never know where they were going, by effectively destroying the object permanence in the Overlook Hotel premises with every few scenes. The disconnect between the perceived idea of the hotel and the actual structure of the hotel that we see plays a huge role in making us realize the unexplained mystical tendencies of the hotel. Kevin MacLeod, an architectural scholar, noted that Kubrick's transformation of the architecture gave the implication of an impossible space that truly can't be understood in reality, and this adds a layer of haunting to the Overlook Hotel. The spatial inconsistencies we talked about also perpetuate a deep sense of unease and distress. Throughout the movie, we watch the Overlook Hotel transform from a passive structure into an actual malevolent entity that can induce hallucinations, create gruesome imagery, offer a glimpse into the future, and more. In the early half of the film, we see Danny biking around the hotel. The camera movement in that particular shot makes us feel like we're actually Danny traversing through these long hallways like that. And that's probably why when Danny comes across the Grady girls, the whole thing feels as shocking as it does. The hotel manipulates the awareness of the visitors, effectively playing with their senses, which in turn has a huge psychological impact on the visitors who engage with them. This is why we could say that the Overlook Hotel is far more dynamic than we might have considered at first glance. Anthony Macklin, renowned film expert and critic, explains that by highlighting the confusion that viewers might be feeling while watching The Shining, Kubrick is actually portraying the Overlook Hotel as a living being. Since this is a horror movie, it makes complete sense for the Overlook Hotel to embody all these characteristics, which in turn leaves the viewers with a fear that they can't shake off. The horror genre has both fictional and non-fictional horror elements. However, in the stories we've seen so far, the horror of the so-called places are beyond our actualization. We all know that the location isn't actually haunted. To portray the so-called horror of a location or an inanimate object, we see the monster version of these places. Think of the way that the house changed in the movie Monster House. But that is where the Overlook Hotel differs. We never get to see the monster version of it. There are no fangs, no talons, no tentacles. From the beginning of the movie till the end, the Overlook Hotel is this grand structure with perfect decor and perfect structure. And despite the seemingly innocent view we are getting at first glance, there's a darkness about the hotel that brews right underneath the surface, which we are clued in on by the living architecture of it all. The Overlook Hotel managed to get into Jack's psyche by trapping him in the never-ending corridors and infiltrating his mind. Once the hotel managed to find one weak spot in Jack's psyche, it ripped a hole into that small tear and squeezed the life out of it. In a way, we could say that the hotel metamorphosed throughout the movie and, in the end, assimilated the character into the essence of the hotel. As we watch our main characters, the Torrance family, go through their respective character arcs, we would say so too does the hotel. As we've already explained, the fact that Kubrick could use the sets to create the interiors really helped add to the unease of the characters and the viewers. Another little tidbit about the set that you should know is what actually happened to it. The set at Elstree Studios actually went up in flames in 1979, much like the original Overlook Hotel. Later, after the production was completed in 1989, the elaborate set was demolished after the studios were sold to Tesco. Since we no longer have access to the actual studio set, we would say that this also adds another layer of mystique to it. The way Kubrick does his cinematography is exceptional to say the least. He always angles the cameras in such a way that we can't see the mountain backdrop in most shots. This kind of gives off the vibe that we're all just out and about in the middle of nowhere, trapped inside the hotel. These meticulous details of Kubrick's recreation, along with the architectural interplay, have done a great job of portraying the Overlook Hotel as a separate demonic entity. The buildings that we step into are inherently entwined with our own experiences as humans. Every building we've stepped into is played with all 5 of our senses, but when it comes to the Overlook Hotel, our senses don't tend to make much sense. The apparitions we see all over the place enhance the sinister vibe that we get from the place after knowing that it was built on a Native American burial ground. On top of that, we see all the Native American decor in the hotel, which adds another level of disrespect to the people to whom this land once belonged. This wrath, rage, and disrespect are present in every scene, and while it's subtle, the supernatural elements actually manifest the changes you'll notice in the background. The shadowy history of the Overlook Hotel makes it an eerie place, which again helps us look at the hotel as its own being. The hauntings of the Overlook Hotel are incredibly similar to that of a typical haunted house. When you look at it objectively, can you truly separate the hauntings of a haunted house from this place? Well, the answer is no. That's because the hauntings you're experiencing at the said haunted place are attached to the place itself. The memories, the experiences, and the emotions of the people who once lived within those walls are what make the haunted place haunted. And the Overlook Hotel is no different. The Torrance family is repeatedly exposed to those hauntings, with room 237 acting as the main focal point of the malevolent entities. Dick, who is the most attuned to the malevolent nature of the hotel, in fact, goes above and beyond to ensure that neither Jack nor Danny ever steps into room 237 because he knows that that's the heart of the hotel. Every single haunting that the characters experience throughout adds to the Overlook Hotel experience. It trapped Jack because it had a motive. It tempted Jack with the bartender and butler because, again, it had a motive. It knew how to exploit the so-called weak spot once it sensed it, and it grabbed onto that. Since Danny has the psychic shine, he managed to perceive the bloody past of the hotel and also the future events that might take place there. This allowed him to navigate the treacherous halls of the Overlook Hotel more adeptly. Then, on the other side, we have Wendy. Wendy didn't believe in ghosts at first. However, after she encountered the apparitions in the servants' quarter, she became a believer, which also led her to mental anguish. Every single apparition we see or hear about is a deceased person who is now so assimilated with the Overlook Hotel that they can't be separated. The deceased roam the halls of the hotel that took their life. Jack's descent into madness. Why he was the perfect victim in a way. When I first watched The Shining, I wondered why Jack was targeted by the Overlook Hotel. As I read the book later on, I realized that the hints of Jack being the perfect victim for the hotel to exploit were already there. Let me explain. Jack was born in a Catholic household, and he was the youngest of the family. His father was an alcoholic and an abuser. Jack grew up watching his mother taking brutal beatings from his father, and then, the next moment, she would do whatever his father asked of her. Jack knew his father wasn't the best, and yet somewhere Jack always craved his validation because he liked it when occasionally his father would be nice to him. The rare moments of being nice and happy with his father took away all the pain from the beatings that he received from him. Parallel, in Jack's mind, his mother was a weak woman. She didn't do the right things, and hence she got beaten. We believe, in a way, this thought process came into Jack's mind because as a child, when he was supposed to be saved, supposed to be protected, she didn't do anything to take care of him. Instead, she went ahead with whatever her husband said and got beaten up, and that in turn put Jack in danger. I guess Jack always felt strongly about what it means to be weak. He was a big burly man doing typical masculine things as he grew up, and then he married Wendy. She's petite in comparison to him, and in a way, easy to intimidate into submission, something we assume Jack always wanted. He started drinking as a way to perpetuate what he thought was good behavior. He knew how badly he was hurt when his father acted this way, but it's not like Jack ever had anyone else to look up to, so he kept taking after his father, drinking alcohol, and beating his kid and wife. When he finally snapped and hurt Danny as badly as he did, he came out of his haze and realized that he needed to change. He tried to sort his life out, and that was when he got the job as a caretaker. He wanted to spend more time with his family, focus a little bit more on him and repairing his relationship with them, and this job was the perfect first step. However, things, as we know, started taking a turn south. Now, an interesting thing that you would have noticed if you read the novel would be that Halloran never comes out and says that Jack doesn't have the shine. Halloran feels Jack has something deep inside him that he's hiding from everyone, including himself, which is why it's so hard to peer into him. He then tells Danny that Jack does not have the shine, refusing to get into the complicated nature of this power. We believe that because Jack was psychically more sensitive, because of the abuse he had gone through, and because of the stage of life he was in, the hotel found its weak spot. Think about it. If someone is feeling lost and finding their way back, they're probably still in a very wishy-washy state when it comes to their headspace, which makes it easy to ruin, control, and corrupt. The hotel did just that. Throughout the book, we can see how Jack slowly gets tempted into breaking his sobriety. Not only does he get tempted by the butler, but we also believe that the Overlook Hotel as an entity was extremely mentally draining for Jack, even though he didn't realize it on the surface. This led to him getting chipped away with every moment. Now, one thing we gotta say is that we understand why Stephen King didn't like Stanley Kubrick's version of the story. In King's novel, Jack is described as a good guy who's done some bad things, and, well, that's true. Jack is a good guy who's done quite a few bad things. He grew up in an environment where he didn't know any better, and he didn't get the support, the care, or guidance that would have helped him become a better person. Because of that, Jack never ended up being the good guy he always thought of himself until the last minute. He tells Danny to run away and that he always loved him before the hotel sinks its claws back into Jack. The movie, on the other hand, portrays Jack as this horrible guy who has an amicable facade. With the slightest drop of the hat, the mask started to slip and Jack simply spiraled. There's no denying that Jack Nicholson gave us an extremely memorable performance under the guidance of Stanley Kubrick, but that Jack is not the Jack Torrance that Stephen King envisioned. However, the impact that the hotel had on Jack is truly tragic. Over the years, fans have tried to look at the story for symbolism, and there have been various interpretations of the hotel in the theories. Our personal favorite has to be that the Overlook Hotel is our intrusive thoughts. It's so hard to fight against the intrusive thoughts and stay on the right path and not to sink into our usual bad habits. Jack is like all of us, fighting to stay alive, be better, and do better. And like most intrusive thoughts, the Overlook Hotel managed to break him in.
So tell me, pup, are you gonna take your
Marvelous verdict! Whether it's the actual inspiration, aka the haunted Stanley Hotel, or the version we see in the book and movie, I think we can all agree that the Overlook Hotel is an evil building in its own way. It's haunted, evil, malevolent, and perfectly bloodthirsty, which makes it an interesting place to stay in for a while. Would you stay at the Overlook Hotel for an off-season if you could? How would you combat its evil nature? Do you have the shine? You have to tell us if you have the shine. Let us know all of this in the comments down below, and we'll see you guys in the next one. If you liked our content, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to us if you haven't already. Otherwise, thanks for watching, stay safe out there, and have a marvelous day.